Live from the Pathway Studios in Johnston proper. You are live from the Path.
And you're listening to Live from the Path. We're coming to you from the Pathway Studios here in Johnston proper. Welcome to the show.
That's a strong start.
I was trying to think. I've ceased deciding to make apologies for not broadcasting like we're supposed to. I thought, like, we started the year and I thought, oh yeah, we're going to be on it. We're going to be broadcasting. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
And what are we, 2 shows in, 2 months in, a show a month?
Yeah.
We're consistent. That's it.
All right.
Positives.
Here's what we got going on the show tonight. So, first of all, Mike's out, but Greg Hudson is here.
Hey.
You remember him? He's the guy that tries to cheat at Secular Solomon. So if you don't recall, that's the guy. It's good old Greg Cheater Hudson.
Fun to do.
So anyway, Greg, thanks for joining us tonight.
It's good to be here.
And so we've got some articles. So this is what happens when we don't do a show. There's we got articles flying around. There was one in Christianity Today that says half of millennial Christians say it's wrong to evangelize. So we're going to take a look at that. The Christian Post had an article, liberal Lutheran pastor melts purity rings into vagina sculpture, presents to Gloria Steinem. It sounds like a made-up article, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like something you would find on some sort of satire site.
Oh, Babylon Bee.
Like here,
Right.
we took this thing, and then Gloria Steinem just is there. But no,
There's something ridiculous that could never happen.
that's right. It's on the Christian Post. And then Mike had something from Apple News that said the rise of the star-studded, Instagram-friendly evangelical church. So anyway, we're going to get to those, and then we've got some advice on Dear Life from the Path, and we'll see. I took a peruse of it. There's a 65-year-old woman that says she wants to be admired for more than her looks.
Huh.
Wants men to look at just a little bit deeper. So we'll see if we're capable of that.
You must be a looker.
Yeah, no, she self-proclaimed.
I mean, she's in her 60s.
Yeah, 65.
And still. All they can think of is, I can't think of you as anything other than an object.
Yeah, so I'd assume that just follows a man to age, right? Or do you think it fades off? A 65-year-old man isn't doing that anymore?
I don't know. Have you ever seen a 65-year-old Warren Harding? He's looking great.
No, that's not what I mean.
Testosterone kind of depletes a little as you go.
Yeah, I mean, does that deplete your ability to?
I see what you're saying.
I mean, to see the next few steps through, but maybe it's just movies. The movies are fooling me, but they always got some kind of old guy looking down the road giving a whistle or something. Is that not true? Am I being fooled by the Hollywood elite?
Well, as a guy who's has experience around old people in Kiwanis,
yeah.
I remember 3 years ago going to the Urbandale Golf and Country Club, and they were upstairs meeting, and downstairs was a pool. When I walked in the room, all these much older than myself men were oogling out the window and making all kinds of comments, and I thought, what are they looking at? And then I realized it was a swim pool with young women with bikinis.
Okay.
I was embarrassed, thinking, these are your great-grandchildren's ages. Do you not have any morals?
Well, that really feels awkward.
Yeah. I was like, guys, it's Kiwanis.
Yeah, let's pull it together, fellas.
Let's ring the bell and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Greg Hudson, I feel like you had some doubts on this.
I had some thoughts, and I was like, I think if she has, because this woman, well, we're gonna get to it with Dear Abby, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to it a little bit later here.
How embarrassing! How embarrassing! All right, anyway, we'll pick that up on Dear Life from the Path. I'm not sure that word that you used.
Did it? Did it?
So here we go. From Christianity Today, half of millennial Christians say it's wrong to evangelize. Actually, after this story, remind me. I have an interesting thought. Interaction with millennials and churches and workplaces. I'll get to that after we talk about the story. So it says, millennials used to be the group that churches and ministries were angling to evangelize. Now, all grown up and poised to overtake baby boomers as the largest generation, they're the ones doing the evangelizing. At least they should be. But new research from the Barna Group and the creators of the Alpha course offers some disappointing news regarding the 20-somethings and 30-somethings now on deck to carry on the faith. nearly half of practicing Christian millennials, churchgoers who consider religion an important part of their lives, believe that evangelism is wrong. They're more than twice as likely as their parents and grandparents, boomers and elders respectively, to say that it's wrong to share one's personal beliefs with someone of a different faith in hopes that they will one day share the same faith. While this statistic could easily bolster stereotypes of a lazy, distracted, and increasingly unaffiliated generation, the minority of millennials who have stayed active in their churches also show higher markers of commitment in other areas, as well as savvier sense of the religious pluralism and diversity they were raised around. The recent Barna release found that despite the reticence around the practice, millennials consider themselves good evangelists and still see themselves as representatives for their faith. That's funny. Hey, we don't think this is a good idea, but we're pretty good at it. Nearly all practicing millennials, 96%, said witnessing for Jesus is part of being a Christian, and they were more likely than any other generation to say they were gifted at sharing their faith.
What? How do they know?
I'm pretty good.
That's like the best parents are people who don't have children yet.
Yeah, right.
I was an awesome parent before I had children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All went downhill from there, huh?
Well, then, yeah. I mean, theory is great.
Okay, so hold on. Let's look at this. So they get generational differences on faith sharing. Here we go. Part of my faith means being a witness about Jesus. Millennials, 96%. Oh, it's a agree, disagree. 96% millennials, 97% Gen X, 95% baby boomers, 95% elders. You know what's interesting? That that these aren't 100.
Yeah.
There's 4%, 5% roughly of every Christian you meet that says part of my faith means being a witness about Jesus, and they're like, I don't really agree with that.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's weird.
It's wild.
I'm thinking that, though, you're putting it through a filter of people who actually really believe and follow Jesus and are disciples, as opposed to someone who says, oh, yeah, I'm a Christian.
Yeah, that's like, oh my goodness, 90% of people in Congress are Christian.
Yeah, there you go.
Really?
They sang God Bless America that one time.
They did that one time, I remember. But that's more of the colloquial Christian label versus maybe practicing.
I mean, you could at least fake it well and vote for the 100.
Maybe.
You know what's interesting is that I suppose we've had kind of that discussion before about some of these surveys, but it predicates on a person who says, I'm willing to represent my faith incorrectly, but otherwise be truthful in the survey. Like, it's kind of a weird dichotomy of a person who wants to be faithful to the responses. So let's see. The best thing that could ever happen to someone is for them to come to know Jesus. Dan, for baby boomers, what percentage do you think believe that? Agree.
Baby boomers. Of Christian baby boomers.
Yeah.
Well, I would... I'm going to say 88%.
88? 97.
That's just better. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Because I was going to go high. I thought, no.
Again, though, I mean, I don't want to get greedy here, but I mean, I feel like this is 100.
I mean, yeah. No, I don't think people should believe in the Jesus I believe in. No, that'd probably be a mistake for some.
You know what would have been super interesting is if they followed up with, if you don't believe that the best thing that could ever happen to someone for them to come to know Jesus, like, what is the best thing that could happen to someone?
Yeah, but what's the better option?
Like the shakes from the Chick-fil-A or something. Like,
right?
Yeah.
No
doubt.
Blessed.
Well, it's like those old elementary school true-false questions here. You always hope for the true because sometimes they said, all right, is this true or false? But if false, tell me why it's false.
Yeah.
But you were always hoping the true, you just say true and you move on.
Yeah, I hope it's true.
False. So if you say no, why? You got to explain why. Tell us more. That'd be great to hear. But they did not do that. It does not appear.
So here was the crux thing. It is wrong to share one's personal beliefs with someone of a different faith in hopes that they will one day share the same faith. So let's be clear on something here. The title of the article was "Half of Millennial Christians Say It's Wrong to Evangelize," but the question was more specific than that. I don't know that it matters, frankly, when the takeaway is, but they're specifically asking, do I approach someone of a different faith to believe something different? That's not... when otherwise 96% of them said, or 97% of Gen X said, that it's part of my faith to be a witness to Jesus, or about Jesus, and that they think they're pretty good at it. And so there's a bit of a caveat here. The implication is still wrong. It says that, like, maybe there might be other ways, I guess, is kind of the implication here. So it's still wrong, but like I think the title's a bit misleading.
What's the exact wording again of the survey question?
It is wrong to share one's personal beliefs with someone of a different faith in hopes that they will one day share the same faith.
All right.
It's wrong.
It's kind of evangelism, though. I mean, I guess the wording, though, might have turned some people off.
Yeah, and it depends on how they start to define faith, right? So, like, do I look at, are those denominational differences, or do they, like, literally mean it's like me and a Hindu?
Yeah.
Right?
True.
So 47% of millennials said that it was wrong, 27% Gen X, 19% baby boomers, and 20% of the older generation.
I think that's a good point on the is this under the umbrella of Christendom? And I think that's a fine question only because if we're talking like Lutherans and Catholics and then Methodists, if you're thinking, it's wrong to tell the Methodists that they need to share my faith as a Baptist. So I think if they're thinking in that particular regard, then maybe it would be lower. But unless you're talking about Hindus, Sikhs, talking Jews, if we're talking Muslims, if we're talking about other religions outside of Christianity, well, I think that's a good point because maybe people were thinking under the umbrella of Christianity.
Yeah, because it also says that in 2013, a different survey said that 2/3 of millennials said they had presented the gospel to someone within the past year. I mean, that's pretty stiff.
Yeah,
That's good.
That's pretty solid. Like if true. So I think the title of the article does a disservice to the conversation, frankly.
So they're only talking to people who they believe have no faith in anything. Maybe
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're already practicing whatever, I should leave you alone because all religions are equal. But if you don't believe anything, well, you might as well believe mine because I know you and you know me. I can help you.
So I think that's where I struggle with the vagueness of the question. Is like I wouldn't have any reason to try to again to Greg's point within Christendom, right? Like I'm not gonna, I don't necessarily feel like I have to convert a Methodist, right? So and so I don't know if it's wrong, like again, like if there's a moral wrongness to it, but that's different than say dealing with someone who fundamentally believes something different than what you believe.
That would explain the generational difference, I do believe. If that is the context in which people were taking it, I think that would explain it much more likely. I think the church wars, per se, the denominational wars were much more prominent in previous decades than they are today. I think when you look back in American history, we're talking the Lutherans versus Baptists versus Catholics versus Protestants versus Baptists versus Episcopalians versus all these things were much more prominent in previous years and previous decades of American history. And yet where we've come now, I think that would speak to the fact that those older generations, what does the oldest generation say?
They're at 20%.
They're 20%.
20% said it's wrong.
So yeah, 80% of people are like, no, it's not wrong because those Methodists need to be Baptists. It's said like things like that. But today, 50% kind of where we've come within the umbrella of Christianity is much more religiously pluralistic. And within that pluralism, I think it's more like, you're Methodist? Okay. I'm Baptist. That's okay too. We're all on the same Jesus team. And while we have different styles, those different stylistic differences within denominations, between denominations, I think they are less
Substantive?
Yeah, I imagine so, or at least on the surface.
They assume, yeah. It shows you they're somewhat ignorant of the differences because if you're actually reading the Bible, some of them you'd look at and go, you really kind of. Maybe I'm speaking as an old guy here, though. That some of them actually should open their Bible once in a while. Some of the denominations. And they would come up with different conclusions than what they're doing.
No, so I don't disagree with that. So, but I would say they're missing out on. They're missing out on the fullness of life following Jesus, but not missing out on Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, maybe that's just a generational thing that says, like, I don't think that's right. Is it something worth tossing seats over? I don't know. Yeah. Like of all the things that we can agree on, if we can go there and like we get of all the things, frankly, that people are prone to getting wrong, there's a little bit of hubris in fighting over some of that, but some of it is certainly worth fighting for. And I think that's the risk too, is if you have completely open doors, you don't recognize, there are things you have to draw distinctions on. And I think if you're not willing to do that, that's a disservice, I think, to the gospel itself. And I think you do have to continue to fight for what is true. I think that there's the question as to how deep you allow a schism to exist for some of that stuff.
Sure. And I wouldn't call that evangelism either. But
no, agreed.
Again, that's probably how I'm defining it, and maybe
interesting.
Joe, 80-year-old guy, wouldn't think of it that way.
Yeah, I that does seem like it would make sense, and like they were. That's like such a significant difference, either 47% to say 19 or 20%. But this is the same group. Here's another question on the survey. If someone disagrees with you, it means that they are judging you. The baby boomers and elder generation, about 10%. Millennials, 40%. That's kind of embarrassing, fellas.
I think these relationships can be somewhat inverse here. Ben, what you said a little bit ago was tossing chairs. I think Christian folks were much more willing to toss chairs 30, 40, 50 years ago than they are today. I think the tossing chairs within Christianity. But yet, I think the difference lies, let's go with secular versus Christian, okay?
Yep.
So 50 years ago, secular folks not tossing chairs as much in regards to their passionate secular beliefs. But Christians, over some disputes within Christianity, much more willing to toss chairs. I think the relationship is inverse. And I think in 2019, what you'll find is that Christians of different denominations are much less likely to toss chairs, and yet secular folks, they're much more willing to toss chairs, again, for their secular beliefs. That's what I say.
Yeah.
So, what was that, Dan?
I said, yeah, I was agreeing.
And so what that thing that you just said was this generational idea that if someone disagrees with you, they're judging you. And I think that's a secular attitude that has been much more prominent over the past couple of years. If someone disagrees with you, either in any regard, then all of a sudden it's an automatic judgment without even saying, I'm judging you for believing this one thing. We see it in politics. We see it in spirituality. We see it on every issue in society here, and that's kind of where we've gone. That is not a surprising statistic to me personally.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't question. You're right. I don't question the statistic. I question the reality of it. To be honest, right? So, I think one of those things, the thing that kind of causes that is the simple nature of how. This is true for all generations at this point, I think, but especially millennial and Gen X generations, is how we take in information. I am more likely to be engaging with people whose reaction to disagreement is a form of judgment, because a normal person wouldn't say anything. The truth is, the vast majority of people I know that I'm friends with, that I interact with on a normal basis, don't use social media. And even if they do, I would rarely see an opinion from them, because it's not helpful. It's not a valuable place to conduct the information, which means that type of discourse is staying out of that platform because it doesn't find fruit. So what remains behind are people where disagreement equals judgment. And I think potentially misrepresents what reality is, at least where those things are playing out. So if that's the only place, if you only hang out at the playground where the bullies are, your perception is that people are getting bullied everywhere.
Yep.
But the truth is, the bully, the people who aren't starting fights aren't hanging out where bullies are at. And so it's I wonder if that perception comes from just simply an overexposure to playgrounds that are filled with people who act like that.
Yeah, and I think that's point of social media is an important one, because the world that we surround ourselves in, social media and news-wise, is one that agrees with us.
Also true, yeah.
So when we are constantly bombarded with the same thing, so whether you're watching this news channel or this news channel or another news channel, you're bombarded with what you already agree with. And so the second that someone disagrees with you, it becomes a lot more personal than it did 30 years ago when everybody was getting this news from the same source.
That's right. You're not sharing an op-ed space in the back of the newspaper with different groups of people. You've catered what you hear. Here's and even if it's not intentional, you may not have gone on and said, "Hey, I only want to hear this type of news." But the thing's tracking you. It knows what you like. It knows the articles you choose, and so it gives you more of that. And so you do tend to get a narrow worldview, even if it's unintentional. And then when something breaks into that, it does run the risk of it sounding something that otherwise might have sparked a reasonable public discourse.
Oh yes,
now sounds like
correct.
it's putting a spear in your side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. Yep.
All right. So but based upon that reaction, I said I was disappointed that if someone disagrees with you, it means they're judging you. I mean, I suppose it's possible, but from a consequence, I don't know. I'm not sure what it matters. Like that term's a little loaded anyway. Like, what does it mean to be judging? Obviously, if you say something and I say, "Hey, that's wrong," I mean, yeah, there's a judgment in there. You've said something and I've judged it incorrect, but like that's how people conversate, right? So there seems to be a load on people are judging me, of which case, like, it's just a description of what is going on, and it's evaluation, if you like that word better. But that is what they're doing, but that's how people take in the world.
Yep.
I heard something. Do I agree with it? Do I not agree with it? And here's my reaction to such a thing. That's a normal human thing. That shouldn't be a problem that someone would be judging us unless we're saying that we're concerned that I say something and they say, well, you believe that, then you're stupid. And I suppose if that's the case, that says very little about me and way more about you. Mm-hmm. All right.
Good stuff.
So here we go. Let's see. Barna President David Kinnaman points to the rising cultural expectation against judging personal choices. Practicing Christian millennials were twice as likely as Gen X and 4 times as likely as boomers and elders to agree with the statement, if someone disagrees with you, it means they're judging you. He says cultivating deep, steady, resilient Christian conviction is difficult in a world of you do you and don't criticize anyone's life choices and emotivism, the feelings first priority that our culture makes a way of life. As much as ever, evangelism isn't just about saving the unsaved, but reminding ourselves that this stuff matters, that the Bible is trustworthy, and that Jesus changes everything. Several evangelicals' reactions to the Barna release pointed to the need for better Christian formation of younger churchgoers. I think they're overreacting to this. Mm-hmm. To be honest with you, I feel like it's an overreaction to what's going on. One of the things you got to be super careful with is, and this is dangerous. It makes the world difficult to navigate, and I think this has been pretty pervasive over the last 20 years. Is language changes. Language starts to shift on us. People start using, talking about concepts a little bit differently, and words don't just quite have the same connotation as they did, and so you risk reacting to a situation that I think maybe the Gen X crowd and the millennials aren't reacting to. I think they are worried about, like, there's a counter reaction to perhaps an overstep on behaviorism. Christianity that focuses primarily on you walking through the steps and puppeting yourself in such a way that you will be acceptable to Jesus, which no one intended to put through, but like that's how they saw it. And so I think there is a higher focus. It's not a disregard for what people do, but I think there's a higher focus on what is the state of your mind, of your heart, and your intention of following Jesus. And less about the exterior evaluation as an entry point. Now, so I will say this. So I go to, I visit quite a few coffee shops for various meetings with people, and I will tell you those coffee shops are at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:30, are filled with guys my age, full of them. Mm-hmm. And I would say 80% of them are in doing a Bible study of some sort or another. I mean, this isn't like a group of elder statesmen in the church. This isn't a high school youth group. Like, these are guys raising kids. I got 4 kids and a full-time job who are up at 6:30 in the morning, meeting guys, doing Bible studies. And so I think it is not my experience that some of the reticence, in agreeing to the language that was proposed in the survey is expressing itself in ways that otherwise don't have people saying it matters what the Bible says. It is a true thing. It has an impact on my physical world and life, and I intend to follow it. That is not my experience dealing with people and being out in public, interacting with folks my age, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's just a risk that you take. Where I think there's generations that are reacting to certain language or implication, but you got to be real careful. There's nuances to what they're actually reacting to, and so to look at, say, a millennial generation and be like, they're lazy and they don't think evangelization, it's wrong to evangelize. Like, that's the wrong takeaway here. And so I think you just got to be careful with how you react to that. There was a few reactions here from Billy Halliwell. He says, I'm a millennial, and this is pure evidence of the failure of the church to prepare youth to understand faith or speak out. Interesting. So back to that 2/3 thing. That's what I'm saying. I think you got to be careful on how you react to this data. Beyond that, it's also a result of a cultural crisis of secularism bombarding us at every turn. You can't pin the belief that evangelism is wrong on Facebook, distraction, disenchantment, or recession, wrote Samuel James, a writer at First Things on Twitter. The data here strongly suggests that Christian millennials are being catechized by their colleges, not churches. I can't get there. I think those are. I think they do exist. I think that people are catechized by their by the nation, the culture that surrounds them. I think you run the risk of not wanting to offend someone. Like, no one wants to have to tell someone that, like, the way that they're living their life is counter to what's good. That's a hard conversation regardless of your generation. But loving people enough to tell them is, I still think, a quality thing. And I just, I think what is changing, is the willingness for those generations of people to interject behavioral guidelines against people with whom they do not agree on the basis of truth of the guidelines themselves. So are less likely to go up to a group of people and say, hey, look, you need to change your life because Jesus says you're not supposed to act that way, to groups of people who don't know Jesus. They're like, my experience is that they are primarily concerned about introducing you to Jesus so that you agree on the authority of such a thing, so that what then Jesus speaks matters to you. Whereas I think it's potential that we were trying to change people's lives with good Christian teaching to people who didn't care about the source of it. And so that probably is true. In fact, I wouldn't doubt that. Of course, you run the risk of missing the point either direction too far. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.
It mentioned the cultural crisis of secularism bombarding us at every turn, says Billy Halliwell there in your quote in your article there. And I don't know. I think it's almost. We were talking about how the flow of generation moves. You know, the time moves along and then people change over time. But it's almost like young Christians are like 20 years behind the game here because, you know, in the 1990s, secularism was much more, I'm okay, you're okay, everyone's okay. But that doesn't strike me as the attitude of secularism in 2019. The attitude of secularism feels more today to me like, I'm okay and you're not okay.
Yes.
And therefore, this like millennial Christians who were in their 20s and early 30s and things like that, this concept that they are kind of in a space where I'm okay, you're okay, and I'm not going to be judging you about Christianity. Sure, I like Jesus, I love Jesus, and eventually I want you to have Jesus, but I'm not going to push hard on Jesus for you because there's still this secularism for 20, 30 years ago saying, I'm okay, you're okay, everybody's okay, but that's not the secularism of 2019. So I don't know if maybe 20 years from now, if we're really lagging behind the culture, maybe we'll get to a place where we are pushy again. And then there'll be a lot of pushy people. I'm okay and you're not okay if we have a cyclical nature of this. So I don't know. Tough to say.
I think that conversation will be forced, to be honest with you. Like, I think to your point where secularism continues to become emboldened, it'll push you to a line. Like there's certain cultural things that are showing up. I mean, they've been showing up forever, but like as the tide starts to turn, they start making deeper distinctions, and Christianity will and followers of Jesus will have to answer for them. Our general. So as an example, I think there has been some passivity about abortion. I think you have groups of Christians who are very strong, Catholics especially, actually, about the protecting the sanctity of life. And then I think you've got a bunch of middle ground folks who are like, that's a pretty loud thing to weigh in on. Maybe I won't speak to it. Like, we had the freedom of not speaking to it, and I'm not sure that that was good. I'm not sure that's a positive. And frankly, I think the trend there will continue to press that. To where we have to be able to call things at their core. They will be what we believe or think will ultimately be forced to be laid bare. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. Like, we don't need. We're not bereft of people who have a better way of marketing Christianity. We're after Christians, like core people who love and follow Jesus, who are passionate about it and who love other people. Like that's largely been the gap there. Is we don't need people who are kind of just trained to go out and sell the product. We need people who believe and live the thing. And that's compelling. That's a strong, like the thing that will draw people to Christ are people actually following Christ. And so I think that will continue to press itself. I'd be surprised if within 20 to 30 years you're not finding that it is even like explicitly culturally unacceptable to believe in the core tenets of Christianity. And frankly, I think that's the time of when you see a positive momentum in people actually coming to meet Jesus. When there's nothing left to hide behind but the good news and Jesus himself. Let's see here. Let's see if there's anything else good here. Younger folks are tempted to... Well, hold on. I'll read the last two paragraphs here. But evangelism remains a sticky point among a 21st century crowd which sees tent revivals and tracts as a thing of the past. Yeah, see, if that's your comparison, I feel like that's a risk. Like, hey, we're not, like, they don't want to do it. Like, if they say... It'd be wrong to say they don't want to do tent revivals and handing out tracts, so they believe evangelism is dead. It seems like a misdefinition of it anyway. Evangelism is often presented as an old-school, out-of-style idea with little value or relevance in our fast-paced urban world, wrote Hannah Gronowski, the founder and director of Generation Distinct for The Exchange last year. Younger folks are tempted to believe instead, if we just live good enough lives, we can forego the conversation entirely, and people around us will almost magically come to know Jesus through our good actions and selfless character, she said. This style of evangelism is becoming more and more prevalent in a culture constantly looking for the fast track and simple fix. So I think it's a bit of an unfair characterization, because the truth is that, like, if you live good enough lives, I think there is good news communicating through what you do, but if it's focused completely on yourself, then yeah, they're not going to catch it, right? Like there's an expression, the core, even the core nature of resurrection is a physical existence. It says you live in some way or another and do things. It's not a mind. It's not a mind belief. It's not a heart thing. It is an expression, is a holistic understanding of what it is to live and follow Jesus as a physical being even. And so I think there's very much, like, you run the opposite risk that says, look, I'll tell everyone about Jesus, but it's not reflected in my life, versus someone who says, look, I'm going to do everything Jesus asks me to do and be faithful in that, and then people will come to know him. I actually do believe that, but it required, like, part of being faithful to Jesus is actually loving people enough and telling them about it.
Yeah, right.
And so like I think it's not an either or distinction, but like I think you could live on a basic principle that says I'm going to love and follow Jesus and do what he does, which includes serving and loving and telling people good news. It's all kind of bundled up in that kind of thing. And I don't think it's magic. I think the gospel will do its own work, just like I think preaching the Bible will do its own work. But which is different than to say, hey, I did a focused thing by standing out on a street corner and saying these words. That actually turns the gospel into some sort of potion or magic thing that I can just abracadabra. If I say these things, it will grab somebody. We're actually losing that art form. People are not surprised. They're not even taking in casual conversation like that. And so this goes back to the thing I didn't want to miss. So there's a crisis in corporate America, similar to what I think is playing itself out in churches. So what they did a study, and what they found that, like, millennials are not interested in corner offices. Like, they don't care. That the things that corporations that used to be seen as, like, this is what winning looks like, this is what achievement is. Millennials are entering the job market, and they're going, I don't really care about that. And the truth is like they look at it, and the core things that they want is that they want the work they do to matter, and they want it to feel like it makes a difference. And so things that we used to do, so churches can run the risk of trying to build good habitual work. Hey, to be a good Christian, you should come here, and then you should join and do the classes that we offer. And here's a few other things that you can do. And can you get in good habits related to corporate function? And millennials are not, from a church perspective, aren't running away from good habits. They're asking that they mean something. And here's the cool thing is that a lot of church habits do mean something. It's good. They're good things. But they're introduced to them in such a way that they feel like they're just going through motions. And the same thing is true in corporate America. So corporate America, especially if you look in kind of like white collar work, a lot of times you don't measure success correctly. You run the risk of saying, hey, we're going to do a project. We're going to launch a product. We're going to improve efficiency. Like pick 3 buckets of things that corporate America is always doing regardless of the industry. And you cheer the fact that something was completed. Hey, we released updates to the software once a quarter. Hey, our sales numbers went up by 10%, blah, blah, blah. And so the thing is that like this was something that otherwise made a lot of corporate America like happy. Like we were going through the motions, we were succeeding in doing the work we were given, and so that was sufficient. Millennials are entering the workspace and saying, no, I see that this is what you want to accomplish, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't actually improve the world. It doesn't help anybody. We don't want to do it. And so they're becoming dissatisfied with the work. And so I think the risk is that you look at millennials and go, they're lazy. They don't want to do the work. They're lazy. They don't want to come to the thing that we set up. They don't want to go through these motions. But like they're actually, a lot of times they're asking what is a hard but ultimately a right question, which is, are we a part of something that is actually doing something? Is it making a difference? Their sense of measurement is much different. The amount of measurement ability that sits within a millennial generation is markedly more than what you were capable of measuring 40 years ago. And they're used to seeing measurements and asking those types of questions. And so, yes, they could be a lazy generation. I think there are aspects of that are also true. They have high expectations about entering something and how they're treated. But and I've noticed that in corporate America as well. But I will say that the motivation to come in and say, boy, we want to be part of something that matters. Does this really matter? Not just because someone said to do it, not because we've been doing it for 30 years, but does this actually make a difference to things that we care about, and can we be a part of it? Those are good questions. And I think it is a mistake for both churches and corporate America alike to look at those things and say, look, we want to mold you into this thing, into the way that we've always done it, and try to convince you that the corner office really is the right gig. Whereas, the question of what is the core value that we're trying to obtain is a good question, and it helps to refine work that's being done, and I think it's good. And so I think that's the risk, frankly, we run in both areas of not accepting that and using that for the value that it could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just different priorities for different generations. For a baby boomer who was born in 1950 here, their parents would have gone through the Great Depression, which means when they're thinking about what's important to them, they still have a slice of survival within them. They just think because they grew up with parents who knew what survival was because they were living through World War II. Generation Xers, they're a little further removed from it because now their grandparents were the ones who survived the Great Depression, so the slice is smaller. But now we're 3 generations in to a post-1945 prosperity in the United States of America, which means if that little slice of I have to survive has been getting smaller and smaller and smaller as the years have gone by, now we have millennials who be like, survival's not enough anymore. What else are we going to do? We need more than just survival. And since we need more than survival, what else has meaning if we're past survival? We're past, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we are well above the base stage of survival. Right. And that's when it opens up to so many more ideas about, well, what can we do about this? What can we do this? That's why among young Christians, I think social justice is like a bigger thing than it was a previous generation ago. Just because, to put it bluntly, it's almost like they have more time. I was just paying bills the other night, and I was realizing how hard was it, Dan Hudson, how hard was it to pay bills in the 1980s?
You mean like to have the money or just the process?
No,
Seems
I'm
like a lot of work.
The process.
It was a lot, yeah, there was
time.
writing checks and doing envelopes and licking stamps, and yeah, it was.
I feel like I wouldn't have paid anything.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it. Maybe that's just us millennials, Ben Foost.
But
you're lazy.
Yeah. Yes. Here's the thing. So that's what it is, though. Is it I look at it like, boy, that's just unwieldy. All this check writing business.
Yeah.
But then again, so now that you've dispensed with the basic things, you look around and say, what am I to do with myself? Something that matters. Whereas there's a sense of stability. That's the thing, is that there's a blindness to it too. There's a blindness because you're living. My generation is living off the stability that was created in the generations before, and without actually owning some of it, we now grow weary of this stability, and we wish to use the freedom that we have in a good way. Now, see, here the thing is that's a positive thing. It says with the time and resources that we seem to have, and the not worrying about basic, stable things broadly as a generation, we say, what else good can we do? There's a very positive thing about that. I don't think there's any reason to continue to lament over the years gone by and to live in fear of that. But there's also a real there's a risk of losing it completely. This is why you have social justice warriors living in their parents' basement. And so, like, there's hey, I don't worry about stability. Someone else will provide it for me so that I may care about this thing. I think both are good. The concept of that goes back to the corporate America thing. Is if you think the corner office was a sense of stability. Like, you worked your way up. It was evidence that you were consistent and that you delivered. And the corner office was the one that didn't move. You stayed there, and you could be there for a long time. Most of the people in my generation, like, they're job hoppers. They'll move every 3 to 5 years. And so if I step back from that and I say, hey, man, why can't you just stay? Why aren't you just staying? That is a value that I place, probably oddly within my generation, that, like, most of them don't. They're like, what is the sense of commitment? And the things that drove stability don't really exist anymore. The promise of a pension, of a company being around forever to provide you some sense of retirement. You know, like, you're better off chasing benefits company to company. You're better off the best way to get a raise is to move, is to go to a different company. Like, you will almost never get the same pay bumps staying with the same company. It doesn't work that way. They'll continue to give you raises, but they'll be measly relative to moving to a different job somewhere else, even if it's the same position. Like, it'll always be more. And so that's what they do. And it's a different value system. And I think you got to be careful at saying one's inherently right or wrong. Frankly, I see value in both of them. And I think there's something you can learn from both of the thought processes. And I think the biggest risk we run is cutting one off and saying, like, that's completely misguided. It's not misguided to say, we've got time and resources. How then shall we do the most good in the world? Following in the footsteps of Jesus. We expect it to matter. Like, yeah, that's great. Can you forsake that on the opposite side of just relying on the stability of someone else? Like, that's not good either. But, like, I think you just got to be careful. I think there's we run risk about closing off and thinking that whole generations of people are thinking wrongly. They're reacting to something and they're trying to point somewhere. And there's certainly things that the world can learn from it.
And the church can learn from it.
Yeah.
And just how you deal with different ages of people, different groups of people here, because as it turns out, people are different.
Yeah,
Imagine.
right on. I mean, here's the thing. One of the probably a big miss was, as this generation started to come up, that we weren't ready for it. This is true in corporate America again and churches. Like, if you'd have seen this coming, what an awesome springboard. You got groups of people who are like, I want to be out doing something and I want to do something that matters. And if you've been prepared for that well, for things for them to do without them having to try to, we mock them. They go out and find it themselves, and we're like, oh, look at you. We don't even know if you're solving legit problems. But, like, if you prepared people for that, you probably have like one heck of an energized group of people focusing on the right types of things. And instead, like, lacking guidance, they identify what they believe are their own problems, which may not holistically be correct. Right? They're not getting a full picture to identify what problems they actually could be helping solve. And so that's probably something that we can continue to kind of do better at. All right. Good. We're done with that one. Let's go to this one. This is from the Christian Post. Liberal Lutheran pastor melts purity rings into vagina sculpture. Presents it to Gloria Steinem.
Finally.
Liberal Lutheran pastor Nadia Bolz-Weber unveiled a sculpture of a vulva made entirely of old purity rings to protest evangelical purity culture, and presented to a pro-abortion second-wave feminist, Gloria Steinem. Bolz-Weber, the founding pastor of Denver's House for All Sinners and Saints, showed off the sculpture, which was made by melting down the old jewelry during the 2019 Makers Conference last week. Every single thing and person that seems so powerful and inescapable, I name them, and then I just go footnote, Bolz-Weber told conference attendees. I mean, seriously, Pontius Pilate, he's a footnote. Your bully from middle school, footnote. Your depression, footnote. Your... I'll say stupid. She said the S word. Boss. Footnote. All those things are very real, and the harm that they have on us in the world is also real. But to me, the whole point of having faith is it allows us to believe in a bigger story than the one we tell ourselves. Those purity rings are a footnote, she declared, unveiling the sculpture. The rings we couldn't melt down spell out the word freedom and were woven into this heart. Isn't it amazing, she said while presenting the sculpture to Steinem amid audience applause. In some evangelical circles, purity rings, also known as promise or chastity rings, were given to young girls as symbols of a promise they made to abstain from sexual activity until marriage. The controversial pastor who has defended the use of so-called ethically sourced porn first announced her art project at 2018 Makers Conference, where she explained she wants to take down the church's teaching around sex and evangelical purity culture. This thing about women that the church has tried to hide and control, and that is a canvas on which other people can write their own righteousness. It's actually ours, she told the Huffington Post. This part of me is mine, and I get to determine what is good for it, and if it's beautiful, and how I use it in the world. She then put out a call on Twitter asking any woman who no longer used their purity rings to donate them to her for use in the sculpture. In exchange for donating the ring, the pastor said she would give each person a copy of her new book, Shameless, A Sexual Reformation, in which she argues that the church teaching on sexuality has caused harm to many people. According to a video posted on Makers Conference website, the response was overwhelming, with hundreds of women sending in their rings. One female welder agreed to make the sculpture after 5 men refused, claims the video. I thought it'd be kind of difficult. Hey, we need you to make a vulva out of this thing.
Why not?
I don't know, Dan. This stood out for you. What stood out? What caught your eye here?
Well, to me, I guess it's just what we were talking about earlier. How about open up your Bible? Here's a church that needs yes, she's calling herself a pastor of a church that is just teaching falsely. Now you can argue on the different, aspects of how far you go with purity and stuff like that, I guess, but not too far. I mean, the scripture's pretty plain on it, and she always tries to push the envelope, and it's my understanding of this gal. She's pretty off with a lot of doctrinal stances. So it's sad. It breaks my heart as a father of 2 daughters with purity rings who took them very seriously. That she's celebrating sexual immorality, really.
Yeah, it's too bad. Like she had said in the article, the interview, she said, "This part of me is mine, and I get to determine what is good for it, and if it's beautiful, and how I use it in the world." And here's the thing: that's not true, right. and not even related. Like in a grand, like, that's not even true about me as an individual. I don't get to determine what is good for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trustworthy to do that. My sense of what is good and not good is suspicious. And I think that's just I think anybody that can't admit that is just not living in reality. Like, just the very nature of the choices you've made. Like, unless you've lived a perfect life, or you've never made a choice that you regret, like, you have to at least cop to the fact that, like, there's something in you that is not always capable of identifying what is good. That's how we learn lessons, right? Like, you do something wrong, and then you recognize that it was good. And so the subject or the standard then of what is good or is not good has to, if it's up to individuals, then fine, this is true. But if in the presence of a holy God, who has actually gone through the process of saying this is what is actually good, and to the extent that you do not fall in line with that, like, you run the risk of doing something that God said wasn't good. And, like, he wouldn't tell you to do it if it wasn't good. Like, that's kind of the nature of him knowing the difference. And so, like, I'm trying to see if there's something I can sympathize with here. Like, it's too bad that frankly this movement was focused primarily on ladies. To be honest, like, I don't know, unless I'm missing it, Dan. Was there a dude element to this?
I don't believe so.
No.
And
that's too bad.
Yeah.
I think that's a significant miss. In fact, any thought that says the lady's on defense here, and that this is not a guy's responsibility to not only maintain and protect his honor, but the honor of any woman he intends to deal with, That's a significant miss. And here's the thing: is that like it's very possible that the church has attempted to do this, and men just ain't grabbing it. But ladies will be like, yes, I actually want to be faithful to this thing, and so they're more willing to grab onto a movement like this. That wouldn't surprise me one bit. Mm-hmm. But the thing is I guess if I roll it all up, do I believe that what God says is good in the world is intended to be a shackle, or an elevation? And it would be the second. Like if I believe it is a shackle, then that's what you're going to end up with a vulva sculpture, hand it to another lady. But I look at the laws of God and say these are good. These are good because He says they're good, and He's created them for our good. And it is in my best interest to adhere to them. And to that extent, like, here's what you do. So, has anybody been to the Grand Canyon?
Yep.
No.
Wait, who said yeah?
Yes, I have.
Okay, Greg's been there. Okay, Greg. Do they let you just? There's like viewing areas, right?
Yeah.
With rails.
I mean, the official viewing areas, of course, have rails.
It's got guardrails on it. In fact, they built something at the Grand Canyon that like extends over the canyon that you can kind of walk.
That's the glass bottom thing.
So there's rails on it, right?
On that part especially, yes.
Yeah. So right, like with good intention, they said, look, here's how you can enjoy life, but stay within the rails.
Yeah.
And no one looks at the rail standing over the Grand Canyon and walks against it and goes, what is this crap? What is this shackle that doesn't allow me to live how I want to live? I should be able to do what I want, including walking off this platform. Mm-hmm. Like no one thinks of it that way because they believe that it is protecting them, that it was put there with wise thought, and that it ultimately is right. And they can look at the wisdom of it and say, yep, you know what? It's a pretty good idea that they put that there. Otherwise, I might accidentally harm myself. And God's laws are that. They're that thing right there. And so it says, hey, yeah, it's your body, and it was created to do really cool and good things, and to feel good, and to do good, and to produce miracles. And this is how you take care of it. This is how you treat it. This is how other people are to treat it. In fact, you can only engage it with one person. And if you do it in this context, it will do all those things for you, and it will be the right experience. That's what it's intended. That's not I don't look at that as a shackle. It's a guardrail that says, look, these are good and beautiful things. Here's how you use them well. Here's how you're part of that thing. Mm-hmm. And so is it true that people have taken that proper concept and probably used it in a restrictive way? Yeah, I don't doubt that. People are sinful and wrong. But it doesn't mean that the core thing that says God's laws are good, God's intention for humanity is good, and if He puts restrictions or direction on it, it is for our good, that simply is not a shackle. And so, like, I fundamentally would disagree with those things. So to the extent that you found something of which people are teaching or restricting outside of the Bible, well, great, then you have a Pharisee problem, and Jesus called the same thing out. I didn't make a vulva statue out of it. I'm confused at how things ended up over there. But like,
we all are.
If you're rebelling, if there's a rebellion against man-made restrictions that God did not put in place, great, you're joining Jesus' revolution. Congratulations. You have a friend in the Lord. And like, I'm in with that. I'm totally in with it. But like, anytime that you change that and then rebel against the Lord and somehow prescribe that your view of the world is better than His, it's a clear and obvious miss.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things you were just saying. Number one, a lot of things. Number one, the idea that this in the 90s or whatever, that the purity ring or the purity movement was focused on ladies alone. That's not good. That's not good at all.
Yeah.
Because I have daughters and sons.
Yep.
And so do you. Dan, you only had daughters, so
that's all I care about.
There you go. That's all.
That's not true, because I want them to date men who are pure.
Right.
Yeah.
But this concept that, oh no, this is the lady's responsibility is really, really off base.
Yeah.
And it's just not good. The article you mentioned, Joshua Harris' book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye.
Yep.
This past year, Joshua Harris has come out and apologized and said, yeah, I made a mistake.
Yep.
There's a lot of, and I think what you described, Ben, was people are taking this way, 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 way too far. I think there's some guidelines set forward in the Bible that are pretty simple, that are pretty straightforward, and yet the idea that people have taken a pharisaical turn and really, really emphasized this like above and beyond extreme kind of nature of this purity rule. I think it's been taken too far, and in many ways it's probably been kind of harmful. But isn't that what we've seen over the last 20 years, 30 years? Just this idea of this sex-obsessed society. Sexual obsession. Everyone's obsessed with sex. Everyone's obsessed with everything dealing with sex and sex and sex and sex and sex, right? And it shouldn't be too surprising that on maybe the pro-sex and the anti-sex side of things, there are extremes. And what used to be like, hey, oh, you wanna wait till marriage? I respect that. That's fine. That's fine. It seems like this lady is going on the opposite side. Like, no, that's not fine. It's not only is it not fine, we need to actually mold something fairly, I don't necessarily call it an idol, but the idea that you are crafting something out of metal and then presenting to someone, I don't know. I'm not a big fan.
That part's weird to me.
I'm not a big fan of crafting things, symbols out of metal, and then handing this symbolic thing to someone else who is symbolic and making a big statement out of it here. It seems like this pastor lady, she also apparently is obsessed with sex.
Yeah.
In the counter version, but she's very obsessed with sex. And I don't think any sort of obsession with sex is healthy for our society. It's not good. If we're talking about a sexually obsessed society as a whole, that's going to lead to bad places. It's going to lead to bad places on so many regards. And yet this lady, in almost being so anti-sex, she's becoming even more obsessed with maybe the people who she's fighting against. And then it just seems to me like she just wants to be on the news. Mm-hmm. It seems very attention getting.
Yeah.
Like to put forth her message of that this purity movement was wrong. Okay. I see where she's coming for that. But that's not what she's doing. She's doing that, but then she's going above and beyond, and it feels like that above and beyond is totally for attention. And so what I see is someone who is, despite what she says, also very obsessed with sex and sex in the culture, but also really, really wants to be well known. That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm trying to think. All right, this is what's going through my mind. I'm trying to think in what way I would feel honored if someone gave me a statue with 2 testicles on it. Like, I can't figure it out.
It'd be tougher though with that though, only because the specific situation at hand, I think what she's trying to say is that this purity movement has actually oppressed women more than it's oppressed men. And so therefore the same thing for men probably wouldn't apply as much. Yeah, no,
I understand that. I'm just thinking like in general, of all the things you could make the statue of, like I can't think of a circumstance in which it would feel appropriate and I would be proud to receive a set of testicles.
Here you go, Ben. Here's 2 golf balls. What do you think?
I don't feel like I think maybe this emphasizes your point, right? Like you could have done this with just about anything. There's lots of things that represent. It almost feels diminishing to say, like this is the thing we decided to craft.
Because there's 4 aspects. Number 1, I want to collect a lot of purity rings. Okay, actually no. There's 5 aspects. Number 1, I want to collect a lot of purity rings.
Yep.
Number 2, I'm going to sell you or give you a copy of my book. I think that's a big part of it too. Number 3, we're going to melt these down. Okay. Number 4, we are going to craft a part of the female reproductive system.
Yep.
And then number 5, we are going to present this to a woman who, as far as I know, is not a part of any Christian community. I'm not sure about that, but and so that's 5 big things that tell me this is not just about this purity movement wasn't the way to go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Man,
a lot of stuff.
Boy. Okay, well, hey, maybe you got some thoughts on that. Maybe we've said wrong things and you would like to enlighten us, or you agree completely. Either way, it's called the appropriately named complaint line. That's 515-517-0085. That's call or text 515-517-0085. That is the Live from the Path complaint line. I check that thing faithfully whenever I show up to the show. So just so you know, I will almost always respond back to you, but I only check it right before we come on the air here. So just don't feel bad. But shoot us something. Let us know.
Sure.
All right, real quick, let's do a Dear Live from the Path. Dear Live from the Path, I've been reading your advice and for a very long time. I'm an attractive 65-year-old woman. I have no problem meeting men. I have been told numerous times I look 20 years younger than my age. The problem is, if I hear another man tell me how beautiful I am, I may go ballistic. I want a man to appreciate me for my intellect and my personality. I thought when I was past 50, I would no longer have to hear about my looks. I want a man to appreciate the person I am inside, not outside. I don't wear makeup, and I don't dress up. What does an old lady do to get a man to appreciate her for her brain and not her looks? Sincerely, Jane Mansfield.
Wait. Now, what was the
Annoyed and
opening sentence?
I've been reading. I've been reading your advice for decades.
Well, okay, the second one.
I am an attractive 65-year-old woman.
I mean, she's talking about it.
She does seem to be focused on it.
I love the confidence. Strong, confident woman of 65 who is really just attractive, according to her. Confident.
Yeah. So, I mean, what is she says, I want to move to something, I want deeper reactions from fellas. What do I do?
I guess I'd like to know the context where she's meeting these fellas.
Let's play this out, shall we, gentlemen?
Yeah.
All right. So, a gentleman meets her. He finds her attractive.
Where are they at?
Hey.
They are at an outdoor mall in Florida.
Okay.
I'm going to guess it's in Florida. There's not an address of this place.
And they're both there individually?
Both there, and then he sees her across the crowded outdoor mall and says, hey.
Is she eating yogurt?
Low fat. After all, she's trying to keep her...
Yeah.
No, she's not. She just does not care.
Oh, she doesn't care at all. You're right.
She can't help. She's beautiful.
Full fat.
So at this point, they engage in a date, and I would say to... what is her name again? What are we looking at here?
What's called Jane Mansfield.
Jane Mansfield, that's right. So we're looking at Jane Mansfield. I would say to Jane, look, you got a fellow on the date. This is the opportunity. So you want to prove that you're not vapid? Then I think this is a great opportunity to prove how deep you are. And if, for lack of a better term, your attractiveness got the butts in the seats, now that they're in there, go ahead and make the most of your opportunity and demonstrate that you are indeed deep, that you are indeed intelligent, that you are indeed, as far as I can tell, the entire package.
Yeah. All right. So maybe perhaps to expand upon Greg's point here.
Sure.
In your example, how does he notice her? He doesn't look across the mall and go, "What a personality."
Can't tell.
Right.
Like he can't.
Yep.
So reasonably, like anytime you engage with a man comes up to you, he's doing so because he found you attractive in some way or another.
Step
if
one.
it's a stranger. Okay? And so if you say, I want a man to appreciate me for my intellect and my personality, it costs time. And like that's totally reasonable. But like it's unreasonable to think that you're going to find some sort of engagement with someone that you don't already know that isn't at least initially kicked off by a reaction to your physical appearance. It's not your physical appearance isn't separated from your intellect and personality. It's a part of you. And so like yes, that is what might draw him or draw his attention. It doesn't mean he's not capable of appreciating your intellect and personality, but like he has not witnessed it yet. So everything that he's taken in so far, he likes. He probably is game for more, but that will take time. And so you've not provided enough details here, I suppose, to say, like, are you dating a man for 6 months? And he's like, I still just love how you look. I mean, okay, then stop going out with him.
Yeah.
He's the one who's vapid.
Yeah, but like, I mean, you got to give a guy a chance here.
And maybe he's just being nice, and he doesn't know how to compliment you because he doesn't know you at all yet, so he says what he knows.
Yeah, like how creepy would it be? He's like, hey, I saw you from across the way here at the mall, and I love your mind. Like,
yeah.
Weird.
I see the way you do those crossword puzzles.
See, you have Sudoku.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's another solution, I think, at hand, gentlemen. I think that solution is blind dates.
Yeah.
Or pen pal dates. We start a relationship in that way. Go on an online dating website. Don't put a picture. There's options out there for pictureless online dating.
I don't trust that.
Well, she clearly believes that this might be the thing to do, and so online pictureless dating And then what happens is you begin a verbal relationship, not a written relationship, because you're almost like pen pals, exchanging, and then eventually they meet up. But you've already established a relationship based on intellectual capabilities and whatnot. So,
all right, this isn't going to play well, but like, could you just try to date a blind guy? Is that wrong? Is that wrong to say looking for a blind fella?
I believe all people deserve the chance for love.
I mean, I feel like that's the solution.
Yeah.
If this is a big enough problem for you, I'm sure there's some singles who have that affliction or empowerment, however you want to think about it.
Anything's possible.
Okay. All right. All right. So our advice is to cut the guy some slack, give him a chance to know your intellect and personality, or go switch to online dating and take the physical out of it, or date a blind guy. These all seem reasonable to me. Secular says, please cut these poor would-be suitors some slack until they get to know the person you are inside. What else would you expect them to say to ingratiate themselves? All right. You've been blessed with good looks, an asset most women would welcome. Stop complaining and appreciate what you have. If you do, you will be an even more beautiful woman inside. Well, all right.
All right.
Here we go. Last one. Dear Life from the Path, my wife and I are having a debate. A married woman is out of town by herself and meets a man 2 nights in a row for drinks. Over the next few months, she talks to him several times on the phone, and then one night he calls her at 9:30 after she is already in bed and tells her he's in town. So she gets up, gets dressed, drop dead gorgeous, takes off and meets him. She sits in his truck for an hour, kissing and hugging, no sex or intimate touching. All of this is without her husband's knowledge. Did this woman have an affair?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
Yep. Across the board.
I think it's besides saying that's just one of those things where it's like, oh well, we only kissed. No. That's kind of a big deal. So not only is there physical, there's an emotional element. This is an emotional affair as well.
Yeah.
I think that's incredibly important too. So yes.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yes.
I wonder who's on the debate side here.
My wife and I are having a debate.
Is this No, never mind. I was wondering if it's Bill and Hillary, but it seems like it'd be the opposite. So
Right,
never
right.
mind. Yeah.
It is just curious in Georgia. All right. So any other? No. Yeah, I think that's a clear cut.
Yeah, you're crossing all kinds of lines. Yeah. No, you can't do that.
The things. If it helps to more easily define affairs, like there are things that you are permitted, or that belong, actions and behavior that belongs to your spouse. To the extent that you share those with someone else, you are having an affair.
Yeah. I think what people might question of is the meeting a man 2 nights in a row for drinks. I don't know. People might argue about that point a little bit more, but even still, that seems like a couple of dates with this random fella.
Here's the deal: is that you go out on 2 drinks, 2 nights with one guy, and you didn't, and your husband does not know.
Yep.
That's an affair.
There it is.
You're
Yeah,
cheating.
it wasn't a business meeting. It was a
This
social.
was not business. It does not say that it was business here, and I think that's what people argue about. Because what I think about with that, I think of the Pence rule that has been talked about quite a bit, where Vice President Mike Pence refuses to meet a woman for drinks or something like that. I can't remember what it is exactly. And I was like, and people argue about that. Oh, well, you're just limiting career options of women. It's like, and so I can't remember if alcohol has to be involved. But anyway, that's probably a different debate. We'll leave it alone.
All right, we're across the board. Let's see. Secular says, yep. And it may have started when she met him when she was out of town. Even if there was no sex act, plenty of intimate physical contact was happening, and that's what I'd classify as infidelity.
Yep.
There we go.
Hey, man, that's weird, though. We're usually not in line with Secular twice in a row.
I figured Secular would say, how about we take these purity rings, melt them, and make a statue?
Set up let's do a 7th grade anatomy class and then move on with our lives.
A hood ornament for the truck, in which business was going on.
Holy cats! A hood ornament for the truck. What are you talking? Are you talking about putting a vulva on the truck?
I was saying any hood ornament, but I suppose that would be odd. Well,
yeah, that would be odd.
I've seen other things off the back of a truck.
No, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
So
I don't understand that either.
No.
Dan, did you do that on your truck?
No.
Did it go through your mind?
Never.
No, I didn't. Yeah.
No.
It's not. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's it. I think that's.
I think what a great ending here.
I think that's. Here's it. Boy, this
I would not put him on my minivan.
this is a rough. This is a rough couple of shows. So the last show we were talking about Hebrew breast poetry. And we ended up on vulvas and testicles. I don't. Hey, if this isn't your flavor or whatever, just hold on, hold tight. We'll get back around to something probably. But here's the deal. I can't. This thing that does my music and all the fun stuff that it's supposed to do is just not working right today. So we're gonna cut you off. You've been listening to Live from the Path. We really do appreciate you hanging out. Give us a call or shoot us a text at 515-517-0085. We will be out of the booth again at least next week, and then hopefully we can settle in something a little bit more regular. But we'll see how life goes. In the meantime, be faithful to the means. God will handle the ends. You've been listening to Live from the Path.